Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Euberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith. Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Euberman. I am really pumped today to have Jon Espy on the podcast. Jon, how are you, man?
Man, doing well, brother. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're on. I really look forward to talking to you about some really important topics about what you're doing out there. Let me give a brief introduction, and then we'll jump into some stuff from there. So Jon and Chrissy Espy have a passion for not only reaching hand-to-hand for teaching hand-to-hand combat in the war against sex trafficking, but first and foremost, for people to walk hand-in-hand with Christ. Together, they founded S.W.A.T, an organization that trains in self-defense and other tactical areas and certifies through subject control systems for the purpose of making Jesus made known in all the world and to go to the ends of the earth to help those who are captives. So in other words, to synthesize it, you teach martial arts to people who are trying to make a dent, trying to make an impact, and making an impact in human trafficking and sex trafficking trade.
Yeah, that's kind of that's how we started. That's how we kind of got involved in this. Was I was assistant pastor of a church here in northern Thailand, and wanted to really reach the community and wanted to get involved in the community. So I was like, I only know how to do two things: I can preach and I can fight a little bit. And so I was like, I'm already preaching. Let me try to.
It's a powerful combination.
Exactly, that's it. And so anyway, so we started a self-defense program, or just an outreach class from the church, and then that God's going to bless that and grow that. And through some mutual friends who got connected with Destiny Rescue, and started training their rescuers. And that was 10, 11 years ago. We started that with them, and man, we've just been training them ever since, and training the rescuers and training other organizations got connected with us and started growing, and then the ministry just started growing from then on, and so we just trained the rescuers how to basically self-defense, defensive tactics, how to get out of situations. We train the house parents, the people that deal with the children after they're rescued and been restored. I mean, because a lot of these kids are coming out of really bad situations, and so they can have bad days, and we've started seeing testimonies from house parents of the kids, kicking windows out and grabbing shards of glass and trying to stab them with it, breaking legs off chairs, trying to beat them with it. We were down in Dominican a few years back, and one of the girls was, had filed down toothbrushes to stab the house parents with, like prison, kind of thing. And so, in a sense of they're trying to they'll do things in reaction. And so we started seeing that the house parents needed a lot of training as well to protect themselves, so they could keep themselves safe, but also keep the kids safe. Because if a 16-year-old girl comes at you with a shard of glass, I mean, you're gonna throw down on her.
Yeah. I'm gonna cry like a girl and get in a corner, but
no, I mean, somebody gonna throw some blows, and so we don't want that to happen, and so we don't want them to break that trust that they've been building, by just wailing on a kid, and so that's definitely never the answer. And so we wanted to give them the tools they needed to protect themselves and keep the kids safe as well in the process of doing it, and keep the relationship as intact as possible. And then we even started training the rescue girls. My wife does a lot of that, and so to give them part of their self-confidence back and be able to, when they go back out to society. And so that's how we started out, and that's how we kind of grown to. And now we have, we're in part of aftercare. We're doing aftercare stuff now, starting to have 8 kids in the home, and we're doing evangelism and outreach. And so that's kind of us in a nutshell. Sorry for rambling on.
No, I love that. Yeah, I love that story. So you're in Thailand now. What time is it there, by the way?
It's 8:30 in the morning.
Okay, so we're
I'm in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm somewhere in the dark, distant past. So yeah, it's the opposite of that at night for me, except 1 hour difference. So it's 9:30 p.m. here. So with that being said, thank you for getting up and starting your day with me. I know that's a horrible sight this early in the morning, but I appreciate your braveness.
Oh man, I had to look myself in the mirror this morning, so I've already seen the worst you can see. I was like, that is
All right, so this is a horrible segue. This is a horrible segue, but I want to ask you this question because it's burning in my heart, and then we'll jump into some other kind of lighter affair stuff. But I just wanted to jump into heavy stuff real quick, just because we're right now. I don't know. You're an American citizen, obviously, but where are you from originally, by the way?
Mississippi, good old Mississippi.
Okay, there's that accent. Okay, so I'm from the Panhandle of Florida. So I'm not from like the Miami woo woo beach area, but I'm from the southern part of Tallahassee, where it's very country. So needless to say,
Truly Southern.
yeah, yes. Um, Needless to say, we're on the verge right now in America here, and I don't know how much you're able to keep track of all this stuff, or how much of it even is you're just like, I'm tired of listening to that stuff, which I could totally understand. But we're on the verge right now of the verdict of the Derek Chauvin trial, who's the guy who knelt on the back of George Floyd and all that stuff. Obviously, a horrible, horrible travesty, and it has signaled probably a much needed kind of discussion and sort of racial reckoning in our country too, where people can kind of a little bit be more sensitive to these issues. However, the feeling that I get, and I think a lot of other people get, and I don't want to try to deflect because I think this is the reality based upon what took place over the summer, is that a lot of people are on pins and needles wondering what's going to happen when this verdict is released. And it just reminds me, man, and I can't help but get a little frustrated this morning because I want to read some statistics to you, and I'd like you to kind of respond to this. So 40.3 million people are in slavery today. $150 billion industry makes up for the human trafficking industry, and it makes it one of the most, if not the most, I know it probably changes from time to time, but it was the most lucrative illegal business in the world. And every 26 seconds, a child is sold, of which the common age of those children is around 14 to 16. And this is according to the Polaris Project, who put together all of these numbers. When I look at what is happening in our nation around police brutality, there's no doubt that there's bad apples. There's no doubt that there's people who need better training or whatnot. But it's just an objective reality that to say that we have a systemic racism problem in the police force does not bear witness to the numbers of what we're actually seeing in terms of like unarmed deaths of black people or whatever. And so I will stand with my brothers and sisters and cry out when I see injustice, but also I think it needs to be proportional. When I see what's going on in the human trafficking industry, and then just to be totally honest, bro, when I see pastors who have never said anything about sex trafficking, human trafficking, have never said anything about the abortion industry and the abortion lobby, but then have jumped on quickly to the BLM bandwagon, it makes me a little frustrated that we don't hear the outcry that we should about human trafficking. So I'm wondering about how you feel about maybe that specifically, but also being in the thick of, I mean, this is perhaps in a sense why you started what you started and why you're in Thailand is you're right there in the thick of what is probably one of the hotbeds for human trafficking, sex trafficking especially. How does it make you feel that sometimes we're missing the conversation here on where real slavery is happening in our modern day?
Yeah, man, it can be pretty frustrating. Um, because like I always say this, if you want to see true systemic racism, if you want to see racism and at its core, man, come to Southeast Asia, come to different parts of the world. You will see actual racism happen. Like hill tribes are make up a good majority of the kids that are trafficked here in Southeast Asia, right? Kids who are from the mountains, right? That are not, a lot of them are stateless. Like half of my kids are stateless. They're not Thai, they're not Burmese, they're not, they're stateless. They're just Aka or Oahu, they're the hill tribes. And to see the actual racism where they can't, they're not a actual in the government's eyes and in the people's eyes, they're less than everybody else. They are like almost like the untouchables in India almost. They are just very much actively discriminated against in a lot of ways. Like you walk into they can walk into the government office when they help us do things, or they're just with us when we go to the visa office, or all these things. And you should hear the things that are said to them. So anyway, I said that to say is that's where, if you want to see actual systemic racism, go outside of America, because it's not there. It's not there in America. It's everywhere else. uh, America is like the bastion of unity when you go to different, once you get outside of.
Yeah, in comparison to these other countries, for sure.
Exactly, exactly. And so it really it breaks my heart to see that, to see people so wrapped up in a false narrative, a just being race baiting people, trying to stir up things, instead of going, okay, let's celebrate what we actually have, the unity we actually have. And then but also to say, um, there's more slaves now than there ever was in history. It's more slaves when the Civil War was fought. It's more slaves now than ever, and people are so wrapped up in perceived racism that actually going and saying, "Oh, this actually still happens." There's classes and groups of people who are being exploited, who are being enslaved, just simply because they can, and are they less than in everybody's eyes. And so yeah, it's pretty frustrating when you see that happen, and you see, especially you see, pastors and churches that jump on the BLM movement, and just it's really frustrating. I don't know
Yeah.
if that answers your question, but
Yeah. Yeah. And just to be clear, like, okay, so if and I think I said this, but if so jump on the BLM bandwagon, but you also have to say, is that to win social credit points, or is that to actually really truly do the work? And I guess that's what I mean, is like, is you're right there in the thick of it doing the work to truly help combat real slavery that is, in the large part, I guess, maybe this is not right. I don't want to be careful because I don't want to miss the statistics, but targeting children, and targeting adults as well, to be sure. But certainly there's a contingent of people that are out there specifically targeting kids to go after them for sexual abuse and for forced labor and those kind of things. And I'm sure you've seen that in what you've done.
yeah, definitely, yeah, that's something that goes on every day. I mean, that's literally why we're here, and there's literally why organizations that we partner with exist, is just to fight child trafficking and child exploitation.
Yeah.
um, because one of the things that's really hard for rescue teams and for those kind of things is to, if they're over a certain age, then it's hard to prove that this is trafficking. um, and so all the rescues, well, not all the rescues, a lot of the rescues um, have to be, kids under a certain age, like under 18, under 17. um, that's the ones they have to target, because then it's automatically, oh, sorry, then it's automatically trafficking.
Yeah.
Once a kid is because a child can't make the decision to go into this work, kind of thing. And so that's the kind of the thing is that, there are people who are definitely just focusing in on children, because you get longer work, you get a longer work lifespan of work out of them. You they fit a certain demographic. There's certain people that will pay for a younger kid, a virgin, those kind of things. And so they're definitely targeted, more than any other group would be targeted, and especially from the hill tribes, because a lot of them, let's say, they don't have ID, they can't really get a good job, they can't really get a good education. Most of them are, drop out of school at sixth grade, fifth grade, fourth grade, or whatever, to go work in the fields. And then if they're like, I don't want to do this, it sucks, then they have no other option. So the one place they can go is the bar, is these brothels. And so that's where a lot of them are drawn into, and people come to the village, and most of it is through coercion to bring them out, to basically bring them into trafficking. It's through coercion and stuff. So
Yeah, and so forgive me, I'm not going to assume that it is, but I want to ask because I don't know. Is there like an age of consent in Thailand, as there is in many places, as there is all over the United States and different states and stuff, where that kind of stuff is legal, or is there a little bit more kind of a loose way in which they look at the law or they look at children over there in terms of this kind of activity?
Yeah, there is they do have a law saying, okay, they have to be under 18 or over 18, is the age of consent in the sense of like working in those establishments. So
But prostitution is legal there, is that right?
no, it is illegal.
It is, okay.
It is illegal in Thailand.
Okay.
However, in one city in its surrounding areas, you have over 20,000 bars and brothels in this one area. Well, you did before COVID, but anyway, so that's in one city, and that city's not that big in Thailand. So yeah, it's illegal, but it's kind of like, it's making us money. So you can get anything you want here at any point, just walking down the street. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. So, so you're actively involved with training people who will go into maybe some of those brothels or go into anything that's maybe underground where they believe that there are other people being held against their will, especially children who are being held against their will, to go and try to rescue those people. So I think this is really awesome. So before I get a little bit into your backstory, the one thing that does bring to mind is that I had Craig Sawyer on the podcast, and I know you know Craig, and you were actually in the documentary. That's where I first kind of actually came to see you guys in the documentary Contraland that he did, which was really great, kind of shining a light on what's going on in Thailand and around there. But the thing that this brings to mind, and maybe this is kind of an esoteric thing or just kind of a side note, but it does bring to mind kind of, again, maybe this kind of American sentimentality toward pacifism when you're dealing with children, especially. It kind of changes the game. How can it not, for a moral person, especially a Christian, to say, all right, like let's put to rest this kind of sentimental notion about what needs to be done about this stuff, and let's actively pursue it, and let's fight against it, literally fight against it. And so maybe this is a foolish question because you probably haven't had much of a moral dilemma here, especially when you're dealing with children. But how have you kind of squared that round hole of being a Christian, but also encouraging people towards not only self-defense, but actively fighting against something?
Yeah. So one of the things that we always kind of look at is, you look in the Bible, I guess it's about the idea of self-defense, of self-protection. So one of the things that we're doing in this, especially in rescuers, is we're not teaching them going in with, nobody's going in and kicking doors in with guns blazing and, popping John Wick style kind of things. It's very much undercover. It's very much going in as a buyer. It's going in, and then you're building relationships, you're finding out connections, and then you bring the police, the human trafficking police, along with you, and then you do a raid if that's what's called for, or you can do what's called soft rescue, where you actually build relationships with the kids, and then once they have their trust and they trust them enough, then you can reveal who you are, and you say, this is, we can get you out, kind of thing. And so those are the two ways, either with a raid or with that. So the self-defense and that we're teaching is, or the hand-to-hand we're teaching is for self-defense, is like when things go bad. And so if you connected that with the Bible, Christ says, hey, you have a sword? If you don't, go out and buy one, right? Sell your cloak and go buy one, right? And that wasn't a big Roman, stinking battle sword. It was a dagger. It was something that was made for protection. It was made for like self-defense. It was like be a handgun in today's kind of society. So that's the idea of it, is that it's for defense, and God is for that. God is for protection of life. God is for the weak, right? It's to stand up to defend the fatherless, defend the oppressed. Those are the things that God's heart is for, especially for children. Is God's heart is for these children that are suffering and hurting and being abused and used every day. I mean, God's heart is for them, and so and it talks about, throughout the Bible, rescuing people from the wicked, dealing with the wicked, dealing with, bringing people out of oppression from those people. And so, yeah, I would say that it squares really easy for me in my mind and in my heart to do almost whatever is necessary to get these kids free. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how I view it. I never really had much pushback from churches a couple times. People ask about, you know, those kind of situations. But most people kind of can square that pretty easily at least in the circles that we run.
Yeah. Yeah, as they should. I mean, the reality is that we can talk about our holy civic duty of voting, and we can talk about preaching the gospel, and we can talk about praying until in the next room over there's a child being molested, and then you have an obligation to get involved in the culture war, the culture war, or to get involved in what's going on in the world beyond just sitting back passively. Now you have to be an active participant if you're a Christian in good conscience, and to go in there, and righteousness demands in that situation that you get your hands dirty.
And that's one thing that we tell people all the time, like, hey, we're all about evangelism. We're all about, we want to be in sharing the gospel. And we can, a lot of people could get together and they say, I can bring you over to Thailand and we can go to every bar and every place in Thailand and hand out tracts and tell people Jesus loves them and all this stuff. We can do that. And we can do that. And you can come to one of these kids and say, hey, there's a tract and Jesus loves you. Let me pray for you. And then they look at you and go, oh, Jesus loves me. Well, where was he at last night when I was getting raped 100 times? And how are we going to answer that? Like, oh man, how can we, answer that question? Well, these rescuers the people that going in can answer the question. They say, well, I'm risking my life to get you out of that. And so then they begin to hear the gospel. Once you've put yourself out there and put yourself at risk to bring somebody else out, they listen to you about spiritual things as well as physical things. So yeah, so that's what we kind of try to challenge people to do.
Yeah, you're the hands and feet of Jesus right there. So you say, where was Jesus when this? And you say, well, he was with me when I was there with you. So I absolutely love that. So let's circle back and kind of just talk about how you got started. So so has this kind of defense mechanism for those who are weak and defenseless, has that kind of always been with you? How did you get started in martial arts? What was kind of the catalyst behind that?
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I heard you say that it was also Jean-Claude Van Damme, which I can only imagine that's why you moved to Thailand, is so that you could recreate Bloodsport.
Exactly that. Like just reenact kickboxer. That was my goal. No, man, it was like I said, started out martial arts when I was a kid. Started out doing it when I was very young, probably 10 years old. Started, and then this kind of was this part of my life. Just kind of was. I played baseball, but I didn't really like it. I didn't really, get into sports too much. But I loved martial arts. Always loved it. Always loved fighting, and so just grew up doing that, and then joined the Marine Corps. Did martial arts there, and then when I got out, I was doing martial arts for another organization or another dojo there in Mississippi, and got connected with the Mississippi Law Enforcement Academy. And so the guy that I have my black belt in subject control systems under is Ron Crew. He was the head defensive tactics instructor at the Mississippi Law Enforcement Academy for a lot of years. And so I would go out there and help him teach and train, and became an instructor under him, and then eventually became a black belt under him. And then I was doing other martial arts, so I got a couple more different belts in different martial arts, and then started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and purple belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Been doing that for 8.5 years. So it just, and I got when I moved to Thailand, I actually got my crew in Muay Thai under a guy here, and so just kind of grew up in martial arts. So for what's it now? Started at 10, I'm 41. So what's that? 31 years, right? It's too early. My brain's not working on math. Math's not my strong suit.
Mississippi and all.
Exactly. But anyway, so yeah, that's been doing martial arts for 31 years now, and just this has kind of been part of my life, and that's how I got started and loved it, and began to see the need for it on a practical level, because a lot of times it's you go into karate class, you're doing your kata, all that stuff. You're like, okay, I can see something. This is good for development, whatever. But how do I see practical in this? Right. And then when God opened up the door for the rescue team, this is the practical. This is exactly what needs to be focused on. And so yeah, so God's kind of opened the door to that, and opened our heart to that. And so that's who my heart beats for, is these guys and these girls. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm surprised, because we're around the same age, it's a year apart, that you didn't say the Karate Kid.
That is one of mine. I remember seeing the Karate Kid 2 with my mom after, like, she got us early from school. I went and saw it at the theater one time, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. That was so Yeah, Karate Kid was definitely a forming factor
Yeah.
in that. So yeah.
Yeah, for me too. Bruce Lee and the Karate Kid. So I did a bunch of different kind of. I did Kimpo and I did Goju growing up, and then Bruce Lee was a major influence on me. So I jumped into Wing Chun a little bit later in life, and then just started doing some kung fu as well. But I loved martial arts growing up. Once I finally kind of felt a call to ministry. I kind of jumped ship on that and really haven't turned back since. But now with the rise of jiu-jitsu and MMA, I'm thinking about getting back involved with MMA. So,
I mean, jump into the BJJ because it is so.
yeah, I need to come out to Thailand and visit you. So, what motivated you to move to Thailand? How did that happen?
Oh yeah, so I had back in 2008. I quit my job and went into to go into ministry full time. Felt like God's calling us in the ministry, and so I was working at Nissan at a truck manufacturing plant. And I just felt like, okay, God was calling me into ministry, so I left, went back to school, and get my degree, get my first 2 years, get my associate's degree, and felt like God just kind of dropped me. Like we had this plan that was going to happen, and then God went, and I had nothing. So I was like, oh my Lord. And so I started praying, God, what do you want me to do? I don't feel any direction. Where do you want me to go? I'll do anything you want me to do. What do you want me to do? And I just prayed and fasted, and he wouldn't answer me. It wasn't like he was like would not give me clarity on any of this. And the next thing that was involved, or next thing was on the list to do in our lives at this point, was we were supposed to go on a mission trip to Thailand. And so I said, okay, God, I'm gonna focus on this and go. And you'll answer me when you answer me. I'll figure this other stuff out afterwards. And so as we were flying actually into Tokyo for connection flight, I was looking out over Tokyo, and God was like, I want you on the field. And it was like, okay. I thought it was Japan. I was like, yeah, I'm going to Japan. It's awesome. I've always, I used to live in Japan, lived in Okinawa for a year. I was like, yeah, I'm going back to Japan. And God's like, no, I'm sending you to Thailand. So we came into here, worked with the church here for about 10 days on that trip. And the pastor asked me hey, would you want to come do a long-term mission with us? I'm like, that'd be nice. I'm fat. It's hot in Thailand. I'm good. I'm going to Japan. And he's like, we'll just pray about it. And I was like, yeah, I'll pray about it. But I actually did pray about it. And just overwhelmingly, once we got back, God just burdened our heart. And so, yeah, we moved to Thailand 3 months after we got back. So 4 months after we got back, we moved to Thailand with my 2-year-old daughter and my wife, and sold everything we owned and moved over here. And man, just God started, working on our hearts here and give us a love for the Thai people, a love for the country, a love for the people here, and open doors. And then we went back. Actually, I did my contract with the ministry here for 2 years, and went back to America. And that's where everything officially got formed there in Virginia and Americans. And then 2000, and we were coming back and forth every like 3 to 6 months. We were back over here doing training for other organizations and stuff. And then in 2015, we found this, move completely back over here and without the back and forth stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how we got started here in Thailand.
So that's great. So, so let's dig a little bit deeper into S.W.A.T though. So when you came originally, you said that you were a pastor. So did you like start a church or take over a church? And then how from there did you say, okay, God's calling me from this kind of traditional ministry to something else, which, by the way, I'm really excited to talk to you about, because I feel like that's kind of the evolution that I'm going through right now at like 40 years old, that I'm taking that step away from the traditional pulpit that I've been used to and creating a different kind of pulpit here with this podcast. But I think it's much needed. Hopefully I'm fulfilling that role faithfully. But I'm interested to hear how kind of that traditional ministry role transformed into what you're doing now with S.W.A.T and training.
Yeah. I know it's trite to say, and it's it kind of sounds, stupid, but it was really Jesus just moving. I had no intention of doing this. My goal in my heart was I wanted to find a little church somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and with 40 or 50 members, preach the gospel to them, just take them to the Bible, get them on fire for Jesus, and send them out. That was my goal in my heart, and it still is to some degree now. But when we got out here, I was assistant pastor of a church here, and began to grow that. And the only other way I could be in um, the country is to have a job. Basically, you can't be a pastor as a job here. And so I was teaching English here at the church, and I was like, man, I'm gonna drive a pencil through my eardrum every time I walk in that classroom. I hate it. I hated teaching English. And so I was like, I got to find a way to just reach the community. And that's how the self-defense class opened up, because I got to do something else. Um, and the guy I was working, the pastor I was working for, my head pastor, was very supportive. He was like, yeah, man, do what you need to do. And so that just kind of grew out of that. So it kind of was organic growing. And when I moved back to Virginia, I became assistant pastor of a church there in Madison, or in Amherst, Virginia. Um, and I began, or Monroe, but it began to build that goal of going to be a head pastor at a small little church somewhere. And God, man, just would not let my heart go from this. Like he just wouldn't. And so it really was nothing that I did. It was just that God just switched my passions, and God just meant I would literally remember going to sit and talk to the head pastor of the church I was at in Virginia. And I said, man, I don't know what God's calling me to do. I can't keep doing both. And we sat down, and he was like, what is your heart? If you're thinking about leaving the pastorate here, does that sadden you? I was like, I'd miss the connections. I'd miss the ability to preach and those kind of things. And he said, well, what about leaving S.W.A.T? And I was like, no, there's no way. And so that was a clear direction shift that God had just placed in my heart.
God kind of did that to me, and I was like, I'd miss the preaching, but I wouldn't miss babysitting fellow Christians. But anyway, keep on going.
No, that's it. It was one of those things where God just went, he just slowly over time shifted my heart, shifted my focus, and then and said, okay, this is it. And even now he's shifting, he's continually shifting. You got to be led by the Spirit into where God's calling you, and where you can be more impactful. And like COVID shut a lot of stuff down for us. Like I can't leave the country. Like a lot of our trainings, we're in 7 different countries. And so haven't been able to get out of the country to go and do what I've been doing for years.
I know, and I have a question about that too. So has that driven some of sex trafficking underground and some of the stuff that was maybe more, apparent out in the culture, and just kind of made those people kind of do things in a more kind of criminal manner?
Yeah, well, it definitely has done that. And one of the things that is shut down a lot of bar, like we were down in Patia. We took our kids down just for a couple of days to get away a couple weeks ago. And man, it was just dead. Like usually that place is like, just like I said, there's over 20,000 bars and brothels in that surrounding area. It is dead. There's nothing there. And so there's just maybe a few bars and stuff that's open. So everything that has been, like I said, in your face has gotten pushed either online more, or in a local situation, or like a local bar situation, going back out into the villages. Because there's no tourists, there's not enough people actually to do buy-in in there. And so, yeah, it's definitely shoved people, to kind of alter their ways of selling.
Yeah.
As it is with all of us in terms of COVID and just totally changing everything. But so I'm just curious too, because I especially want, if there's Christians listening to this, or just even families who maybe feel like a shift is coming, because this is the one thing that I've tried to pride myself on, whether I've done it or not, who knows, and pride's probably the wrong word, but I've tried to position my family in a position where I could say, God, whatever you want, let's do it. So what was that like for your family when you felt like Thailand's the place, for your wife and I think you had one child at that time, or however many you had at that point in time. What was that transition like for your family?
That was pretty easy for them. And pretty easy for us, in the sense of there never was this big existential, like, oh, what am I doing? There was one point where I was had this crisis of faith as we're getting ready to leave. And I was driving, and I always loved going out, and me and my daughter would get in my truck, and we would just drive, and especially during the fall, just drive around and look at old barns and stuff, and just, drive back roads. And so I'm driving one day, and it's getting right next to near fall. And I'm driving the window down, and it's nice and cool. And I see a little leaf kind of go across the road. And I'm like, I'm never going to see this again. And so it was like literally the seasons changing is what made me go, I can't do this. I can't, leave America now, all that stuff. And so something as simple as that was the biggest impact and the biggest, thing that Satan used to try to keep me off the field was just my love for the fall and the seasons and those kind of things. And so that was the biggest challenge. And then, um, so for me, that was the biggest challenge of going, okay, I'm going to leave this behind, and I'm going to leave this behind for my daughter. Like my daughter's not going to grow up with the same things I grew up with. She's not going to grow up in this, like she's going to be away from her grandparents. She's going to be away from all this. And so that was the biggest struggle for me and for me, my wife's parents and my parents, was that just being away from the grandchild was the biggest struggle for them. And then that was the process we walked through, but we just trust in God. God just, as we prayed, God answered. And man, she's more Thai now than she is American. She's more Thai than my Thai kids. It's hilarious to watch her.
And how many kids do you have?
I have 8 kids in my home now. I have 8 kids. Yeah, we have I have a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, 15, 16, 24.
And so you have 8, 7 of them are Thai, and one of them is your biological daughter.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. So that's awesome, and absolutely probably like that's probably why you're bald at this point in time. It's pulled out all of the hair that you have.
Yeah, so it was. Man, I'll tell you, it's actually the first one that came to us was great. Had some issues. We had a how to explain this out. So we actually had 2 girls come at the same time to us from the same organization. And one, she was 15 when she came, had turned 16 while she was with us. She ran. She just ran. We had to go back in the village and try to drag her back out. It ended up being, literally 10 guys with machetes around the little hut we were in, and people screaming at us, yelling at us. It was nuts. I'm on the phone, dropping pins to human trafficking police. It was nuts. And then she ended up running, and we couldn't get her back. I think it was her. She just couldn't deal with being in a family. And so that was hard. But at the same time, there was another kid from the exact same situation she was in, has been with us for 5-6 years now, and she's 24 and she's about to finish college, and she's, it's all these things you're seeing and you go, that was hard to kind of go, okay, God, what, why did one want it, or why did one leave and one not? And because one wanted change, one wanted something different, and the other didn't. And so that was the kind of the birth of this idea for aftercare family and those kind of things that kind of come out of us in that. And they move along until 2 years ago, we ended up bringing our two youngest in, our 2 younger ones in. And man, that was the most frightening, the most spiritually hard and emotionally hard time I've ever had in my life. It was nuts. And we brought a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old in at the same time from the village. And it was, I don't know what was going on with that, but it was so spiritually just attacking me. And I was in high anxiety. My blood pressure was all jacked up, everything else. And so at that point we only had, 3 or 4 kids at that point. And it took about a month of people praying and me praying and just trying to worship God and trying to go, God, I need to have my heart for these kids more and not be so anxious and all this other stuff. And God relieved that. And something broke out of that spiritually that kind of lifted off of me. And now it's been easy. Like now, let's bring more kids in. Come on. There's no anxiety. Even with 8 kids, it's like, I love them all. It's great. We'll bring more in. But it was that first few little steps was the hardest. So anybody out there that's looking at fostering, that's looking at, bringing kids in your home, it's going to be scary. It's going to be terrifying, but just pray and God will bring that off of you, man. And it'll be an amazing thing. So don't let fear stop you from doing something like that. So
yeah. I don't want to rain on that parade, but it does make me realize that, you're not just specifically with what you're doing, but maybe this is foster care, adopting, or anything like that, that you're not just rescuing kids. Rescuing is the first step. And it's real interesting because I was speaking to, I don't know if you know who Sam Childers is, machine gun preacher, the guy that's in East Africa. But he was talking to me now about the kids that he's working with and like the post-Coney kind of trauma of like, now that Coney is kind of a little bit of an afterthought, the LRA is still around and all that stuff and doing some of what they do, but now he's having to deprogram these kids from learning warfare and from seeing murder, seeing their family killed right in front of their face. And if anything, I don't think that should give us some holy reverence, I think, with what it's like to adopt and to foster and all that stuff. But it should show us the need, like people of God. I mean, people just good parents. We need people who can help these kids recover from that stuff. So I wanted to jump to this more toward the end, but we're close to that anyway. So let's just say that there's somebody who feels pricked in their heart. They feel like God's called them to adopt. Where would you tell them to go specifically with organizations that you represent or that you work with?
We don't have any organization that can adopt, that can actually physically adopt stuff out. So everything that people we deal with, it's if they're in long-term care, they're in that care organization. So we have no way of organizations that we partner with have no way of like adopting kids out. So that being said, I have no idea.
That was anticlimactic.
Exactly. But one of the things is if you're in America and you want to impact, like so that you talk about impacting the culture and those kind of things. If you want to impact trafficking, if you want to or be anti-trafficking, man, foster care and adoption is huge. All of these kids that are aging out of the foster care system, that are troubled, those kind of things out of the foster care system, those are the prime pickings for traffickers in America. That's who they're aiming for, because nobody wants them. They're looking for love. They're people, they can manipulate them very, very easily. So if people want to impact the trafficking environment, that's the first way of doing it, is just fostering and adopting and actually loving these kids. Even they're going to push back. They don't know how to be loved. They're going to push back. They're going to make it hard. But that's where the grace of God comes in. That's where just there's the word that came up as we were dealing with one of our kids that come in recently, and she was having a lot of issues, a lot of problems, very much pushing us away. And as we were praying in our time, God's like the word relentless just kind of come out, and got us focused us on that word. I went and looked it up and was like, I don't really know what it means, but I kind of have an idea, but not specifically. But it's this fierce, it's almost like a negative word in the sense of how ferocity and ferocious and just unstoppable kind of thing is. And that's how God's called us to love these kids is relentlessly, and that's how he loves us. He is actively seeking us. He is unstoppably loving us. And so that's kind of what the focus that we have for these kids is. Even though when they're pushed away and they're screaming at us, they hate us, all this other stuff, we're like, yeah, but we love you, and we're going to love you no matter what, kind of thing. And so kids don't understand that, especially coming from trauma situations. And so yeah, it's going to be hard, but with the grace of God, you can get through it, and you're going to impact lives for generations.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's such a great symbol or illustration of what God did to us. Like, we may not have ever been orphans or adopted or whatever, but we know, if you're truly a Christian, you know what the spirit of adoption feels like, because you know what it was like to be far from your father, to be totally unloved, and to have, even of your own volition, to have walked away, and then to have been welcomed back by your father, even though you were an alien and a stranger. So there's a friend of mine who we may have as a mutual acquaintance that I absolutely adore. In fact, he was on the podcast, I think my second episode, and to date it's the most listened to and most watched of the podcasts that I've done, but David Eubank. So he's over there in Burma, and I actually heard from him about a month ago now. He's straight up in the thick of the jungle right now with what's going on with their civil war. So you mentioned that you know him and perhaps you've dealt with him a little bit in the past.
A little bit, yeah. We've had some connections there. There's actually I had heard about him. Living here, and a lot of people we work with knew him and know him because Dave's been here for forever. And we were I was back in Mississippi actually, and a newspaper was doing an article on our organization and stuff, and I was talking to the guy, and he had been over. He's like, "You ever David Eubanks?" I'm like, "No," and he said, so he actually went over with him and did a piece on him and stuff like that. So he actually went over into Burma and did a mission with him and stuff, and so it was really neat. And so he connected us through email, and we chatted back and forth a little bit, and then we was like, oh yeah, we need to meet up and do some stuff. We hang out and talk, and be great. And then just kind of fizzled out, never really come to anything. And then one day, me and my wife are walking through Chiang Mai at this little grocery store, and I look and I see this guy with a FBR Free Burma Race shirt on. I was like, I was like, hey, how are you? And I noticed, recognized his face, like, oh, that's Mr. Davis. I was like, talk with him. And so we met, and he's like, hey, come back to the office. And we went up, walked, literally his office is right across the street from this little market. And so we walked over there and just hung out for a little bit and talked and just heard his story and heard what God's doing with them, man. And just love what he's doing, love what those guys are doing. And then we started trying to connect in and do some training for them, and they were doing some training for us. And yeah, we love those guys. Our paths just haven't crossed enough. The stars have not aligned enough for us to work hand in hand yet, but we love those guys, man. They're doing a great job.
Well, in like fashion, David's an absolute hero, much like you and Chrissy and what you guys are doing out there, man. So I just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing, for the lives that you're touching and the lives that you're impacting. So before we sign off, I do want to just ask whether it's a story that you've heard of through maybe some of the officers or the teams that you've been working with, or maybe a story that you've experienced personally. What's one of those stories that you feel like that you experienced and you said, this is why God called me here. This is why I'm in Thailand and why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I'm training these teams. Maybe just one memorable story from the mission field.
Yeah, will be one of the most impactful ones. Hit me the most. Hmm, would have to be to see where God has brought um, my oldest daughter. Right, that's the biggest thing. To find a kid, to see a kid that was literally from the time she was 4 or 5, having to work in the tea fields and tea plantations to actually survive, to having her parents sell her at a young age and then bring her back, and then all this other stuff, and then to see the trauma that's happened in her life over and over and over through her family and then through other circumstances, and to see her come to the organization that she was with first, and then come to us and see the transformation. This kid did not trust men. This kid did not trust a father at all. Didn't trust that at all, and was very much um, uh, anti-authority. Was very much rebellious in that sense. But then to see her heart, God began to change her heart, and begin to change her heart not only for us and for her family here, and but also for her people. For she would say, I hate my culture. I hate my people because of what they've done. And but to see now God change that heart, and now she's back into her village and back to her people, going, I'm going to share the love of Christ with you, and see people come to know Christ through her. That's the biggest impact, man. To see generations, like we literally have um, 4 of her family members in our connected to our family in some way, and to see a whole family, a whole generation being changed for the gospel is just the reason why we're here. And that's there's actually a documentary that's coming out. It's actually already out. It's in the film festivals right now. I just got nominated for 2 awards at the International Christian Film Festival. And it's basically my daughter's biopic. It's her documentary. about her life. So it's called You Are Beautiful. And so when that comes out, y'all can check it out. Y'all can see exactly um,
Yeah.
her heart, her life, and kind of her story. And so, but seeing that happen, to see the change that God has done in her, and the change that's impacting throughout the whole village and the whole country is just an amazing thing. So,
That's great. I love that story because what that does is not only is that significant, obviously, just individually, like you could drop the mic with that and we'd be good, but I can't help but wonder, like, how many of those girls have you helped in similar or dire situations, needless to say, that maybe you'll never even know about because you trained a team member and that team member went and rescued that girl, got her into the hands of a family that can care for her, or whatever, got her in a place where she could be safe once again. And there's countless lives that have been touched by as a result of what you guys are doing out there. So when I say you're a hero, I know nobody wants to be told that, and we want to deflect that. But the reality is you guys are what you and Chrissy have done in terms of transplanting your whole family, and then taking in those kids, training those teams, and absolutely turning your life over. That's Jesus with flesh on. I mean, that truly is the hands and feet of Jesus. So this is what I think. Not only we obviously need more Christians like that, but we need more to hear more stories of that. So I'm absolutely honored, man, to be able to highlight your story and in our own little way be able to kind of promote that and share that with people.
brother, I appreciate you, man. Like I said, we are no heroes, and I always say that we're like the toenail on the pinky toe of the body of Christ. That thing falls off all the time. And it just keeps going, never notice it. And so that's us. And we're just honored to be a small part of what God's doing. And like I said, we are just a really, really small part of what God's doing. And we're just thankful that He allows us to do it. Thankful for you allowing us to come on here, man, and just share part of our story, man. We really appreciate you, what you're doing, and we pray God blesses you, man.
No, man, that's what I am, bro. I am that because I decided to do a podcast. What I need to do is I need to get my butt in the gym and go learn jujitsu so that I can start whipping up some people that are doing injustice. So real quick before we sign off, I want to make sure people know how to support you and know how to um, access some of the what you guys are doing and become more informed. So what's the best way for people to donate and for people to learn a little bit more about S.W.A.T Ministries and what you guys are up to?
Um, yeah, the best way of getting in contact with us or seeing what we're doing is through our website and through Facebook. Those are our two main
Okay.
social two main outlets of stuff. Pretty much, Facebook is updated pretty regularly. Our website is updated pretty regularly, so we stay connected there. You can go to our website is www.swatministryintl.org
Okay.
is our website, and then our Facebook is just S.W.A.T Ministry INTL, and so you can look us up on Facebook and hang out with us there, interact with us, message us. We try to respond pretty quick. And then if on the website is always a donate button. People can donate through PayPal. You can send a carrier pigeon, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter. We take goats in trade. We take whatever, whatever
Right.
God lays on your heart to donate. We just accept it. One of the things that we are doing, I want people to if you don't mind, people
Yeah.
to know about that. We're actually trying to fundraise now for is we're doing what we call a safe village. And so basically we want to have a place where we can put multiple families in multiple homes on this 10-acre property that we're attempting to buy. And so right now we're fundraising to buy this 10 acres outside the city, about 40 minutes outside the city, so we can make a safe village for these kids to be able to have a place to grow up in a safe environment with family and with others around them to show them the love of Christ and to send them back out as little missionaries into the world. So that's our goal and our heart. And so if you guys want to partner with us in that, check us out on Facebook, check us out on our website, and you can donate that way as well.
Absolutely, that's awesome. So I'm glad you shared that. And how much money are you trying to raise, or is there a goal that you've set for that?
Yeah, the land is 123,000 US dollars. We've raised, I think, about 20,000 so far, I think. So we need about another 100,000
Yeah.
to be raised. And so, yeah. So we're praying God brings that in, and we don't have it, but Jesus does. And so we're praying that He just opens that up and lets us move in that direction.
Well, you guys deserve it, man. You're doing such great work. Jon, thank you so much for getting up in the morning and taking some time with me and enjoying some coffee. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for what you're doing out there, man.
Thank you, brother. We appreciate you, man.
All right. God bless you. Bye-bye, guys.
Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indiethinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.